Hi there, this is Jasmine Chali, and this video I want to talk about Saturn, Pluto, and the effects, obviously, that we are facing right now. Okay, so if we look at the planet Pluto, it's about transformation on a very large scale, and it is an outer planet, so it would affect everybody, okay? Usually kind of like we look at generational stuff, and again, actually, there is generational stuff going on because if we look at the current situation with the coronavirus, the first generation to get affected were the elderly, although it is spreading much wider than that now. But going back to that generational stuff, and then also if you look at Saturn is also to do with maturity and aging, and Saturn and Pluto together are creating all these changes, and being in Capricorn. Um, Businesses, money, institutions, organizations, everything is just getting affected, everything. And with Pluto, this mass transformation, there has to be endings. And that is the bitter truth, unfortunately. Not that everybody's going to be ready for it. It's being imposed on a lot of people. And it's not something that is so obviously welcomed in the way that it's come about. Money, obviously with the Capricorn sign, it rules money because it's an earth sign, so it's our well-being, our livelihood, all that is getting affected. So all these changes that are happening are breaking everything down, and that is the transformation. It's breaking everything down. But along with all that, we're getting the fear. The deep fears are coming up. The fear is from Saturn because Saturn rules fear. Saturn is the planet that is all about cautious and limitation and restriction. And here so many restrictions that are being imposed right now. So it's kind of like telling us something. There are obviously deeper messages behind all this because everything happens for a reason. And then on the other hand, we've got Chiron, which coupled with the moon and everything else that's coming up the next few days, it's about healing. So where is it that we need healing? Where is it that we are feeling stuck? Where is it that things, we have not been shifting things? Where is it that we are holding on to our blocks so tightly that we just don't want to let go? Where is it that we are limiting ourselves with our outworn, outlived beliefs that are not serving us anymore? Where is it that we are not sort of moving on with the times, the consciousness of our time and era, because so many of us are still living with outworn, outdated beliefs and ideas that are just not going to work as the energy, as the consciousness moves on, moves forward, and the vibration is just lifting. So that is why a lot of this is also as we know, linked in planetary wise, linked into this Saturn Pluto. Astrologers had been saying for a long time that major changes are about to come with these conjunctions, the Saturn and Pluto. And there's, more than one that's happening. And people were aware that, something on a kind of large scale is happening, is occurring. And I just want to share with you, actually, I've just remembered that, so, obviously the coronavirus, the first infections were diagnosed and started to come about in December 2019. And I wasn't aware of it actually in December. I started to become more aware of it towards the end of January, because I don't usually watch the news unless it's something, I don't watch generally unless there's something that I have to keep an eye on, like at the moment. So I first began to become aware of it sort of like January time. Now, February, I went to India to my niece's wedding, and I took my parents with me. My parents are both in their middle 80s. And so, I was aware of the virus, and I was very aware of trying to keep them safe and protected, especially at the airports. And the virus wasn't as kind of on a large scale, at that time. Although people were saying, start wearing masks, keep yourself away from people. So the wedding, we were in India. The wedding day was on the 14th. On Valentine, my niece wanted a Valentine's Day wedding, bless her. So she went to, after the wedding, on the 17th, she went to Bali for 5 days for her honeymoon. On the 18th night, I had a dream. And in that dream, I was seeing this little girl, and she was on her own. She was isolated. She was on her own. And there were like these huge arches, doors. They were open. There weren't any doors. So it was all open. But she wasn't allowed to go out. And she kept looking out to see who was out or if she could go out. But there was this voice telling me in the dream, so maybe that little girl was me, my inner self, I don't know. But there was this voice saying, don't go out, don't go out, it's dangerous outside, don't go out, it's really dangerous. So this little girl was like, she was okay, but she was very, very aware that she was not allowed to go outside, that she, there outside there was danger, basically. And then in my dream, as it carried on, there was like this hallway and a corridor, and so my consciousness, in the dream, took me through that corridor, through that hallway, to the other side, and there were these, big open rooms, like in a hospital, like wards, and there was lots of elderly people lying there, and they were sick, and some of these people were very sick. And so in the dream, my consciousness, my awareness was telling me that these elderly people, they're critical, they need help, they're critical. And it was this kind of like sudden sort of like, this is desperate, this is really very, very critical, this is desperate. And in all that, I then sort of woke up, and I started to reflect, and I thought, what was this dream about? What's going on? So the next day, the women were sitting there, and my mum, my sister-in-law, and I said to them, my sister-in-law was sitting next to me, and I said, I had this weird dream last night. And then I explained what the dream was about, and she said, oh, well, a lot of people are saying there's going to be World War III, and there's a lot of unrest, and, and I said, yes, I know there's a lot of unrest, and it's just like, very sad if that is going to happen, really. Now, that dream actually happened on two levels, because when I spoke to my niece on WhatsApp a few days later after that dream, a couple of days later, I, contacted her to see if she was okay, and she said she was okay and everything was fine. But that day, so I had that dream on the 18th night, but it was the 19th day, and on that day, it rained heavily in Bali, and where she was staying, they were told not to go out because the rain was, too heavy. And so, she said that there was some difficulty with the food and etc., but it was okay. And then I thought to myself, well, that could have been part of the dream, the fact that she wasn't allowed to go out. But it's sort of didn't, I still didn't understand what the dream was trying to tell me about the elderly people. And, after that, I'd kind of like forgotten about the dream. And I came back, obviously, to England, and got on with my normal routine of work because, I'm always very busy with my groups and students and working, etc. And so came back full swing, back into my routine. And this week, everything has been closing down. Everything, the government has been coming on really strongly, advising places to be closed down and people to self-isolate. And so today, the spring solstice, it's my first day of self-isolation. And so today, being at home and knowing obviously that I'm not going to be working for some time, I've been reflecting quite a lot. And the first thing that came into my mind was that dream that I had. And I realized now what that dream was about. It was like a premonition dream where you're not, it was obviously definitely my inner child, because not being allowed to go out, because now I'm thinking, well, I need to stay safe, because I need to follow the guidelines that obviously the government is advising us on. And also, if I keep myself safe, I can, obviously, when things are settled down, I can carry on doing all the work that I do to help people. But I need to make sure that I stay safe and I'm not getting infected and then not passing that infection on to other people, because we're responsible for all the actions that we take. But, so this first day of, isolation, I realized that dream. That dream was a premonition of what was about to come, what was happening, because, like the scale of the elderly that we've lost in Italy, it's huge. And that's why in the dream, when my consciousness took me through that hallway and alleyway to the other side where the elderly were, that was what the message is. This is critical. This is very, very critical. This is, and the elderly, they were so sick, and and it was the fright that woke me up in the dream, because I woke up, was like, what's going on, what's all this about? I was actually worried, about the fact that my niece was away, she might be on her own, something's happened, and my parents who I took with me, elderly. So I was kind of thinking along those lines. I was, worried in case my parents got ill while we were out there, because they are, in their middle 80s, 85, 86, and I didn't want anything to happen to them while we were out there. I wanted them back home here safely, and I wanted my niece back home safely, So that was all fine, but what the dream was telling me was all this, what has been happening this week. This week coming up to today is what I realized that dream was about. So I kind of like, realized that our subconscious is very powerful. And I've had these kind of dreams before, with other events and things that have happened. Um, But going back to the astrological, obviously, influence, um, we're being shaken up, and I want to kind of just reflect back on the fact that um, I wouldn't say I feel panicked or scared. I'm not really worried, about buying food, etc. I'll just go daily to the local supermarket and get what I need to get on a daily basis. Um, if there's no toilet paper, so what? There's water. Not bothered about things like that. The reason being is because I actually went through huge isolation, and in my 90s, going back to March 1991, was when I became separated uh, from my ex-partner, and I became a single parent, and everybody closed their doors on me, everybody shut their doors on me, and I became extremely isolated. I felt like I was the only person left on this earth because there was nobody that I could reach out to, nobody at all that I could even, connect to at all. And just to kind of highlight that, last year, and maybe this is why, my chapter was written in this book about that, because this book was published in November 2019, just last year. And maybe, like I said, it was meant to be in here so that I could share the story for this time that we're now in. Um, Sorry, bear with me one moment while I get the page right. Okay, so here, this is my chapter, and I called it Turning Point. All right, and my quote. This is not my full quote. They cut it down, but I'm going to ask them to put my full quote in because it's not fair, really, that I put a full quote in and they've cut it down. So what they cut it down to is, when everyone else shuts their doors on you, you will find your own door. But my quote went on a bit longer than that, and it wasn't written fully in that way. But anyway, the meaning is still there. So, that's what happened to me. Everyone shut their door on me, from all angles. It was obviously meant to happen because of this Pluto Saturn aspect that was happening in my chart at that time. Transiting Pluto was, making, squaring my natal Saturn, and squares are very difficult planets, aspects. Squares are very tough and challenging. And not only that, to top it up, Pluto went over my ascendant. And so that was a complete death of the old self and rebirth into a new way. So, anyway, I do talk about some of that in here. And I won't go into all the details because just, obviously it is here in the book. But when I was entering a very dark period in my life, everywhere I turned, doors were closing. Everybody that I knew, and family, community, people I once spoke to freely, were walking past me in the street as if I had this considerable stigma and they could not or would not look at me. And I had no friends. It was only my son and me at home. I had no contact with anyone. My son would often put his arms around me at times when I was so desperate, and he would say, "It's okay, Mummy, I'm here for you." I felt so hopeless and alone. And if it wasn't for my son, I wouldn't be here. I was in so much pain. And it was during this deepest, darkest, most painful moment that I had an intense spiritual experience. So I then talk about what this experience was, and obviously how it came about. So with Saturn and Pluto, and then obviously Chiron, because also Chiron was playing a significant, part in my chart, and it always does in our chart, because when it's there, it will have a connection to something that's going on. And so we have that that deep wounding, we have that ability to heal. So okay, there is that wounding that happens, because Chiron is that wounded healer, and that wounding and all that pain and everything. So there is that opportunity to heal. So where in my chart where Pluto was making, like that square, um, you know, to Saturn, it then sort of like started to eventually make a square to Chiron as well. More wounding, more wounding. But it was kind of like when Pluto then went into my first house, um, after the rebirth, it was like I started to transform my life, change my life completely. So the point I'm trying to make here is that Pluto will break down, and it will break everything down. Complete ending, complete ending. And that's what some people are experiencing now, complete endings, because their lives are being broken down in some shape or form. And along with that is, Saturn, that's coupled with that fear. So our deepest fears are being shaken up. Go into that fear. What is that fear about? Let it be shaken up, because um when things are being broken down and we're being forced to face our fear, then there is some breakthrough that will happen. Definitely there will be some breakthrough, and there will be the opportunities, and that is, like then the transformation happening, new beginnings. Because ultimately, it's not really about the money. It's not about the assets. It's not about all those things that we are identifying ourselves with, that it's about the flashy cars or the posh house or the designer clothes or, you know, all those things that people tend to kind of put labels on. And even the separation when it comes to like religions and communities, that separation, it's just there so much. We're not really integrating as much as really we should. So it's like, okay, Pluto's saying, come on, drop all these things, drop them, drop the labels. Who are you really inside? Who are you behind all that? And face your fear. Face your fears. What fears is it bringing up? Because when we go into isolation, we're forced to confront ourselves, confront our fears. We're challenged to be just with ourselves, who we are. And some of those areas and things we might not like about ourselves. And if we don't like those things about ourselves, then it's time for change. It's time to, heal and transform and create what we do like, some new stuff. So like, for example, I said that when Pluto went into my first house, I retrained to be a psychotherapist. I became very interested in psychology and psychotherapy and healing and all that area. So it might be that life has got a different direction for you, and maybe that is because deep down you wanted that different direction anyway, and so now it is happening, it is coming about, it is there. So this is obviously my little rant rave, whatever you want to call it, on Saturn Pluto with some of my own examples. I hope they helped you, because it's all about sharing, learning, sharing our hearts with each other. No one's better than anybody else. We are all one. We're all in the same boat. We're all together. So if anything that I've shared has helped you in any way, then I'm so pleased. If it has, even if there's one word that, you know, maybe resonated with you from this video. I hope there was something, but just wanted to kind of like help you to unpick this idea of the Pluto and Saturn energies, and that, you know, yes, there is the Chiron there with the wounding, but there is also that healing. And don't forget also with Saturn actually, and the Pluto, although at the moment there's all this breaking down, change, there is the opportunity to rebuild that, because, you know, it's also about structure, new structures coming into place, because Saturn is very much about structure and planning. So there will be kind of all these new ways and new thoughts about new structures and new styles. So for example, if a business was struggling anyway and they were not really, because I'm just trying to think of the energies, you see, of the Saturn and Pluto. So if a business was kind of like just plodding along and, you know, not really making the changes that they needed to make, and here comes Saturn and Pluto, and everything is kind of like, you know, come to a full stop, and changes, and, you know, so now it's time to reassess and reset. So that's the word, actually. Reset is one of the words that's very powerful in these energies. It's about resetting our direction, our goals, and our way in life. Okay, so I hope you found this video useful and helpful. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe. This is Jasmine DeCharlie, and I'm your astrologer and therapist, and I will be back with more videos on the current affairs that are going on in relation to the planetary aspect. I would like to say that yeah, okay, now I'll leave that for another video. So anyway, take care. Bye bye.